There are many regions of the Islamic world, from the jungles of Sumatra to the deserts of the Sahel. Islam has certainly taken a hold over many diverse regions of the planet. In reality, various Islamic groups have had their own cultures, goals, and civilizations, and often don't even get along with each other. So portraying a Muslim from Somalia and, say, Albania as belonging to any sort of homogenous group other than their religion is quite ridiculous. You can make this argument for some religious groups such as Jews or certain closed denominations of Christians, but Muslims certainly aren't one of them, and through conquest and conversion, the religion has spread from the Arabian Peninsula to encompass an astronomically large segment of land known as the Islamic world. Now, you'll notice that the Islamic world is actually quite contiguous, with the only major outliers being Bengali Muslims in South Asia and Muslims in the Malay archipelago. Now, as to why exactly Islam mostly glossed over India but took such a strong hold in Bangladesh is quite the interesting topic for another day, but as I discussed in a video over the Majapahit Empire, Islam spread to Malaysia, Indonesia, and the southern part of the Philippines through Arab merchants who gradually converted the local population, which was previously Hindu or Buddhist, leaving the last remnant of this once great empire, the Balinese Hindus. Now, there are other Islamic pockets scattered throughout the world, such as the Hui Muslims in the middle of China, Volga Tatars of Russia, or Cham of Vietnam, but I would not consider these groups to be located in the Muslim world because they are by and large surrounded on all sides by other non-Islamic groups and hence are merely enclaves. Now, if a great pan-Islamic empire were to arise, I feel it highly improbable, even in such a universe, that the extreme exclaves of Bangladesh and Indonesia would indeed become external territories of said empire, considering the great distances, and the fact that Bangladesh actually fought a war of independence against its own brother country Pakistan because of the litany of logistical problems, mostly concerning the distance between the two. But just for this video, let's pretend that somehow these global Muslim populations put aside their differences in order to unite as a global superpower, including non-Islamic areas lying in their territory. And I know with that, what little realism was left in this thought experiment was thrown out the window, but hey, let's just pretend this takes place in a parallel universe where these things are possible. Think of it in the same way as when India was partitioned among religious lines, they recognized that many Muslim communities in Kerala or Uttar Pradesh would belong to the new Hindu nation, but also recognized it would be quite problematic to have huge Pakistani enclaves in the middle of Indian territory or vice versa. So in order to keep the new country as compact, contiguous, yet all-encompassing of Muslim-majority areas as possible, I would define the Muslim world as the contiguous region spanning Afro-Eurasia, as well as Bangladesh and 3/4 of Indonesia and Malaysia, and perhaps Albania too. The major boundaries of this new empire would be that with India, China, Russia, the Balkans, Ethiopia, and sub-Saharan Africa, and would cover a land area of over 30 million square kilometers, or 12 million square miles, making it larger than any country or empire to have ever existed, with the exception of the British Empire at its height. And the geology and climate of said nation would be as diverse as its population, which we'll get to soon. The southernmost boundaries of the contiguous core would snake all the way down past the Swahili coast to the southeast African country of Mozambique, with the northernmost boundaries being that of Kazakhstan near Russia. There would be over 1.72 billion inhabitants in the Muslim world, meaning around 85% of the world's Muslims actually live in this region, while around 15% live scattered in India, Russia, Europe, or North America. This also makes it far larger than either China or India, but with such a huge area this isn't too surprising, although only 1.3 billion live in the contiguous area, with the other 400 million living in the external territories of Bangladesh or Indonesia. Its official language, naturally, would be Arabic. As everyone knows, Arabic remains the de facto liturgical language used by Muslims worldwide, even though only 22% of the Muslim world currently speaks Arabic as a first language, and if a truly united Islamic empire were to spring up tomorrow, it wouldn't take all too long for the entirety of the new country to learn Arabic, maybe only a few generations. Although, as in any multi-ethnic empire, regional languages such as Persian, Punjabi, Turkish, Turkish, Somali, Swahili, Hausa, and others would be maintained for generations. The Islamic world is quite linguistically diverse, having representation from nearly every single language family on the planet, but Afro-Asiatic speakers, of which Arabic, Hausa, and Somali belong to, make up close to a third of the Islamic world, with the next largest language family, Indo-Aryan, bringing this up to 50%, with the next largest being Austronesian speakers such as Javanese or Malay, Niger-Congo, including Swahili, Fulani, and other African languages, followed by the Turkic and Iranian language families. This linguistic diversity is also coupled by extreme ethnic and racial diversity as well, as even though the religion of Islam started in the Middle East, the majority of Muslims in the Islamic world are actually located outside of the Middle East or North Africa, so the Muslim world is by no means synonymous with the term of the Greater Middle East. About 38% of the Muslim world is either Middle Eastern, such as Arab, Turkish, Kurdish, or Persian, or North African. And if you're wondering why I grouped the two together, it really is quite difficult to differentiate between the two at a certain point, although culturally they are a bit different. Nearly 20% are South Asians, mostly Bengalis, Pakistani Punjabis, Sindhis, and a very large amount of Indian and Nepali migrants to the Arab Gulf states, who are mostly Hindu. Another 20% are of African ancestry, 14% West African, 2% East African, and 4% Horn African, with Horn Africans such as Somalis being among the first Africans to convert to Islam, and there are also a modest community of a few million Muslims of Afro-Middle Eastern ancestry scattered throughout Arabia, Iran, and Turkey from the Islamic slave trade. 16% of this new country would be of East or Southeast Asian ancestry, a stat obviously bolstered by the inclusion of the Malay archipelago in the East. And as I've discussed in the past, the largest ethnic minority in this region of the Islamic world would be the Han Chinese, many of whom have been settled in the area for centuries. Lastly, around 5% are of Central Asian ancestry, a highly heterogeneous racial group that are basically a hybrid of all the races of Eurasia, but mostly East Asian, and less than 1% of the Muslim world is European, such as Albanians or Bosniaks, but non-Islamic groups as well, such as the Greeks. Currently, roughly 200 million non-Muslims live under Islamic law or in Islamic majority areas, although of course some areas are more religiously homogenous than others, such as Mauritania, Somalia, or Afghanistan, all of which are pretty close to 99.8% Muslim. There are large Christian minorities in Egypt, the Levant, Central Asia, West Africa, East Africa, as well as the Gulf Arab states, and all this adds up to over 100 million Christians currently living within the Muslim world, or around 6% of the population. All other non-Islamic religious groups make up another 100 million and include large numbers of Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, and those who still practice animistic religions, mostly tribal groups in West Africa. And judging by official statistics, around 2 to 3% of the Islamic world is irreligious, although some sources claim this to be much higher, as some claim that as much as 10% of Turkey or Tunisia, two of the more moderate Islamic countries, are agnostic or atheist, and this number, much as in the Christian West, is increasing at a steady rate. By uniting into a single country and economy, the Muslim world would certainly be able to compete against the Western world economically speaking, as by combining the economies of the 68 countries or partial countries included in the Muslim world, this comes out to nearly 18.2 trillion US dollars in terms of GDP, which is slightly less than that of the United States and third in the world overall, and this translates to around $10,000 per capita, which is pretty low for world standards, but you do have some of the richest areas in the world located in the Muslim world, such as Bahrain and the UAE, as well as some of the poorest, such as Somalia, Niger, or Sierra Leone. What kind of government this new country or empire would have is anyone's guess, although if the Islamic world did unite under the banner of Islam, it's safe to say that they would probably be the world's strictest theology, although some sort of regional system would have to be implemented if they wanted the more secular regions like Albania to get along with countries like Saudi Arabia, and ideally the capital would be located in Mecca, although large centrally placed cities such as Tehran, Cairo, or Baghdad could work as well. Now, I've asserted many times that Muslim is neither a race, ethnicity, or nationality. However, I can't deny the reality that in America, Europe, the rest of the Western world, as well as in India, Muslims are often treated as and/or act as a homogeneous entity, despite the clear linguistic and cultural differences that persist between Muslim groups. In recent years, due to large-scale migration of Muslims from many parts of the Muslim world into the Western world, there is often a high degree of segregation and distinction between various Islamic ethnicities in the communities. However, these lines are very often blurred and crossed over following generations of settlement, with those in Islamic communities in America and Europe often placing more of an emphasis on their religious identity rather than their national or ethnic one. For this reason, Muslims in the Western world do in a way act as a pseudo-ethnicity. So when news publications in America claim that Muslims are a race, they're not 100% incorrect, perhaps only 98% incorrect, portraying a small degree of accuracy of the situation only through sheer ignorance rather than careful observation. However, it must be noted that Muslims in America act very differently from a cultural and political sense than those in Europe, who are more segregated from the societies in which they reside, while American Muslims are far more integrated and culturally assimilated into mainstream America. So even though Muslim is not a nationality, if the Muslim world were to unite into a single country, gradually the ethnic and cultural differences would start to fade as the various groups began to mingle, although they would probably never truly disappear entirely. From Malawi to Mongolia, the Islamic world is such a fascinating collection of countries, nations, and territories that cross an assorted variety of languages, races, and cultures. And although it'd basically be impossible for the entirety of the Muslim world to unite, this video was just for fun. I mean, does anybody actually want this to happen? No, of course not. Nobody does. Go ahead and let me know your thoughts on this hypothetical global Islamic empire. And for today's poll, tell me which other religious group you would have an interest seeing unite as a single country. And as always, this has been Mason. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.